Have you ever fallen in love and felt like it wasn't just chemistry, but destiny? Like something greater than logic pulled you toward that person, almost as if your soul had been summoned. You didn't simply fall in love, you were drawn in by a force deeper than desire, louder than reason. It's not always soft or poetic. Sometimes it's disruptive. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And that's exactly what happens in these soul-deep encounters. They don't always come to comfort you. They often arrive to collapse you, but not in a destructive way, in a way that tears down everything false, every mask you've worn, every illusion you've protected, so that what's real can finally rise. These connections, they're not just romantic, they're alchemical. They are spiritual contracts made long before your paths ever crossed. It's not about candlelit dinners or fairy tale endings. It's about shadow work, about being confronted with the parts of yourself you've hidden, suppressed, or forgotten. Because love, true love, isn't always about harmony. Sometimes it's about awakening, and often that awakening comes through emotional earthquakes, not gentle breezes. You'll know it when it happens, because it won't feel like you're gaining someone else. It'll feel like you're finally meeting yourself. So if you've ever been shattered by love, if someone entered your life and turned it inside out, don't rush to call it heartbreak. It might just be your soul answering a higher call. Have you ever wondered why certain people enter your life at the exact moment they do? It's easy to believe it's because you were ready, or maybe because you were lonely. But what if I told you, and it's deeper than that? What if they appeared not because you were prepared, but because your shadow was? Carl Jung, the great psychologist of the soul, taught that within each of us is a shadow, the parts of ourselves we've denied, rejected, or buried. Not because they're bad, but because we were told they were unlovable. And here's the thing most people miss. The universe doesn't wait for your ego to be ready. It waits for your unconscious to open the door. That overwhelming magnetic pull you felt toward someone, that wasn't just attraction, that was recognition, not of them, but of yourself, of the forgotten parts of your soul suddenly rising to the surface. You see, real soul connections don't arrive when your calendar is clear or your heart is calm. They arrive when your inner world is rumbling, when something deep inside you whispers, "It's time. Time to remember who you really are." You may not notice it at first. It could start with a glance that lingers too long, a conversation that somehow pierces past the surface, a silence that feels ancient. And before you know it, your defenses start to crumble, not because they made you feel safe, but because they made you feel seen, truly seen. These people, these so-called lovers or soulmates, aren't just here to give you butterflies. They're here to stir the broken pieces you thought were long healed. They hold up a mirror not just to your smile, but to the pain behind it. The pain you've numbed, the feelings you've denied, the truths you've avoided. It's no coincidence that with them, every word feels like an X-ray. Every silence feels heavy. Every moment feels sacred and sharp at the same time. And that's not a red flag. That's a sign your shadow is being activated. Because when a connection is real, soul deep real, it doesn't just excite you, it unsettles you. You flinch, you overthink, you sabotage. Not because they're wrong for you, but because your shadow has never stood this close to the light before. Real love isn't a warm blanket. It's a sacred confrontation. It doesn't just love your strength, it exposes your fear. It doesn't just celebrate who you've become. It reminds you of who you've buried. And if you're wondering why this hurts more than it should, why it feels like home and a storm at the same time, it's because your soul is cracking open. You are being summoned to remember. So maybe they didn't show up to complete you. Maybe they arrived to awaken you, to help you gather the parts of yourself scattered by time trauma and silence, to stir the version of you that's been waiting in the dark. patient, hidden, afraid. This isn't a fairy tale. This is transformation. And those who trigger your shadow the most, they might be the ones your soul chose to bring you home. Have you ever met someone for the very first time, and yet somehow it didn't feel like a beginning? It felt like a return, like finding a piece of yourself you didn't know was missing, like remembering something instead of discovering it. That eerie sense of déjà vu, the feeling of I've known you before, isn't just imagination. According to Carl Jung, it could be something far deeper, something he called synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence that defies logic but not the soul. When you encounter someone who feels familiar without any past to explain it, it's not randomness, it's resonance. It's not about memories from this life. It's about recognition from somewhere your conscious mind can't access, but your soul can. Maybe you felt it before, that quiet magnetic pull, that comfort in someone's presence you can't rationalize. You barely know them, yet you feel safe. You haven't shared stories, yet you feel understood. You don't even speak the same emotional language, yet somehow they speak to a part of you you've kept hidden. That's the moment your logic steps aside and your intuition takes over. You see, the soul doesn't speak in words. It speaks in energy, in frequency. And when two souls are aligned, no small talk is needed. There's a silence between you that's more honest than 1,000 conversations. But here's where it gets deeper. What if that feeling isn't just about the other person? What if it's about you? What if that connection awakens something inside you that's been waiting to be remembered? That familiarity isn't always about the past. It can also be about your potential, the person you are becoming, the version of yourself you've glimpsed in dreams or felt in moments of peace but never fully embodied. And sometimes that person enters your life not to teach you something new, but to help you recall something ancient, something sacred, something that was always yours. Maybe your soul has been waiting for the right frequency to echo through your being like a bell in a silent room. And when it does, you don't analyze it. You feel it deeply, instantly, without needing to explain why. That's the mystery of synchronicity. It's not about chance, it's about timing, alignment, purpose. Carl Jung believed these moments were the fingerprints of the divine, a way for the universe to show us we're not walking alone, that our path is not random, and that every connection holds a lesson or a mirror. So the next time you meet someone and your heart whispers, "I know you," even if your mind protests, pause. Ask yourself, what part of me do they stir awake? Because these people don't just enter our lives, they activate us. They pull us toward forgotten parts of our story. They reintroduce us to our softness, our intuition, our courage, or even our pain. And sometimes they come to help us remember what we're here to do. It's not always romantic, it's not always forever, but it's always meaningful. And that feeling, that soul-deep recognition, isn't madness, it's magic. It's the universe reminding you your story is bigger than logic, and your connections, they're written in a language only your soul can read. Have you ever met someone who stirred something so deep inside you it felt overwhelming? Not because they hurt you, but because they awakened something unhealed. This is the part of love and connection we don't talk about enough. Sometimes it's not the person who causes the pain. It's the mirror they unknowingly hold up to you. And what it reflects back is a part of you that's been buried for years. Carl Jung once said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And in many ways, that's exactly what these soul encounters challenge us to do. When someone triggers a strong emotional reaction, whether it's sadness, anger, fear, or even obsession, it's not random. It's not weakness. It's a call from your unconscious. You see, emotional pain often arises when a connection touches a place in us that has long been avoided. It could be a childhood wound, a forgotten betrayal, or a moment we never fully grieved. When someone steps into our life and activates that old wound, it can feel like they are the source of the suffering. But the truth, they're not hurting you. They're revealing what's still hurting within you. This is what Jung called shadow work. It's the courageous act of facing the parts of yourself that have been suppressed, ignored, or rejected. The people who trigger us intentionally or not are often the ones who help us see where that shadow still holds power over our lives. So the next time you feel deeply shaken by someone's presence, pause and ask, what is this revealing about me? Because healing doesn't begin when the other person changes. Healing begins when you decide to meet yourself in the discomfort, when you stop pointing outward and start listening inward. Think about it. Why did that particular moment hurt so much? Why did their words echo longer than others? Why did their silence feel like rejection? Why did their love feel like a test? Often the answer has little to do with them and everything to do with you. And here's the paradox: the more intense the emotional reaction, the more powerful the opportunity for transformation. That person didn't come to destroy you. They came to wake you up. They were a storm sent not to drown you, but to clear the air. Sometimes we mistake pain for punishment, but in truth, it's a message, a guidepost, a flashlight illuminating the parts of ourselves still waiting for love, for attention, for understanding. So instead of asking, why did they hurt me, ask, what did they awaken in me that needs healing? That shift changes everything. You move from victim to conscious participant, from wounded to awakening, from broken to breaking through, and that is the real gift of these powerful emotional connections. They don't just come into our lives to offer comfort. Some come to offer clarity. Some come to be mirrors. And the most transformative ones, they come to help you meet the parts of yourself you were afraid to face. Not every love feels soft. Not every soulmate brings peace. Some bring truth. And truth, as Jung taught us, isn't always gentle, but it always sets us free. Have you ever met someone and felt deep down that it wasn't random? Maybe it was a glance across a crowded room, a delay that made you cross paths, a friend's last-minute invitation you almost declined. And yet, there they were, as if life had quietly orchestrated every step leading up to that moment. Carl Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, meaningful coincidence that cannot be explained by logic alone. He believed these moments weren't chance at all, but signals from the unconscious, guiding us toward encounters our souls were ready for. You didn't just meet that person, you remembered them. In love, especially the kind that awakens something deep within us, there's often a strange magic to how it begins. Not in a fantasy-like way, but in the feeling that something ancient just clicked into place. It's like your life had been quietly rearranging itself, so this connection could emerge. Think back. The timing, the conversations, the place, it all seemed to align, didn't it? Almost too perfectly, and when you try to explain it, words fail. Because what you felt wasn't a coincidence, it was a signal. The smallest details, maybe even the tiniest decisions, played their part. That missed train, that new job, that last-minute coffee stop. You thought you were just living your life, but maybe your soul was steering the wheel. What if the people we're meant to meet don't show up randomly? What if they appear when our subconscious is ready, when the shadow, as Jung called it, has stirred enough to bring them into our orbit? It's tempting to brush off these moments as luck. But what if they're more like breadcrumbs from the soul? Little clues pointing us toward growth, healing, and transformation. The people we're destined to meet don't crash into our lives by accident. They arrive at the exact time we're ready to confront something, whether it's an old wound, a buried truth, or an unknown strength. And sometimes the more unusual or unlikely the meeting, the more powerful its purpose. Jung believed the unconscious mind communicates in symbols, patterns, and timing, not words. And when something stirs beneath the surface, when we begin to awaken to ourselves, it ripples outward. The right people feel those ripples, and somehow they find us. So the next time you feel that eerie sense of meant to be trusted, don't rush to define it. Don't analyze it to death. Just pause and listen. Ask yourself, what part of me needed this person right now? What am I being asked to remember or release? What deeper part of me is awakening through this connection, because what looks like coincidence might just be your soul answering its own call. Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt seen? I don't mean the surface level admiration, the kind of affection we receive when we play the roles we think others want. I mean the deeper, almost unsettling experience of being seen beyond your smile, beyond your achievements, seen right down to the raw, unpolished you. Carl Jung called this surface identity the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by society. It's not fake in the way we think of lies. It's more subtle than that. It's the polished version of ourselves, the agreeable one, the competent one, the one that fits the mold. But here's the thing, real love doesn't fall in love with your persona. Real love doesn't care how well you perform. It doesn't worship the image. It goes deeper. It sees the mess, the contradictions, the insecurities, and says, I'm still here. And that can feel terrifying, because when someone refuses to engage with your mask, they challenge everything you've built to feel safe. They ask questions that cut through your practiced answers. They sense your silence even when you smile. They don't just want the version of you you've rehearsed, they want you. Not everyone is ready for that kind of intimacy. And honestly, that's okay, because that level of vulnerability isn't light, it's sacred. Jung believed that true connection begins when the persona starts to crack, when we're no longer content to be accepted for who we pretend to be, but yearn to be loved for who we truly are. And often that process begins when we meet someone who doesn't let the mask work. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who made you feel like you couldn't hide? Someone whose presence made you suddenly question why you were trying so hard to be perfect? It's not that they called you out, it's that they called you in. They saw a deeper truth in you, and somehow their presence alone made your false self feel uncomfortable. That discomfort, that's not rejection, that's transformation. When someone challenges your persona, it can feel like a confrontation, but really it's a gift. It's a chance to ask, who am I beneath this role I've been playing? What have I been afraid to show, and what would it feel like to be fully loved anyway? Some of the most profound soul connections don't flatter your image, they invite you to shed it. They push you not with criticism, but with presence. They reflect the version of you that longs to emerge, the version that's tired of pretending, tired of performing. And when you begin to respond to that mirror, something shifts. You start saying things you've never said. You cry in moments you didn't expect. You laugh in ways that feel unfamiliar but real. That's not weakness, that's your soul exhaling. Real love doesn't want your performance, it wants your presence. So if you're lucky enough to meet someone who sees past your persona, don't run. Don't rush to put the mask back on. Sit with it, let it shake you, because that person didn't come to admire your mask. They came to awaken your truth. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever met someone who triggered you, not just annoyed you, but really got under your skin? Maybe it was their arrogance, their clinginess, their unpredictability, or the way they seemed to demand something you couldn't name but couldn't escape. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. What if the thing you couldn't stand in them was actually something unresolved in you? Carl Jung believed that we all carry a hidden self, a shadow made up of the parts we reject, deny, or can't fully accept. These are often traits we've been taught are unlovable, so we bury them deep. But buried doesn't mean gone. In fact, the shadow always finds a way to speak, and often it does so through other people. Jung once said, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This means we're not always upset with others because they're wrong. Sometimes we're upset because they reflect a part of ourselves we haven't made peace with. Let's make this real. Imagine someone who's loud and demands attention. You find them exhausting. But what if deep down you were taught that speaking up made you selfish, that taking up space made you too much? Suddenly their confidence doesn't just annoy you, it threatens the version of yourself you were told was acceptable. Or maybe you're drawn to people who always need rescuing. You feel important, needed, but over time you resent it. You feel drained. That dynamic isn't random, it's mirroring the unhealed part of you that equates love with self-sacrifice. That tells you your worth is tied to saving others. These people didn't come to hurt you, they came to reveal you. The relationships that challenge us the most are often the ones that awaken us the fastest. And yes, it's painful, because the shadow doesn't whisper. It shows up in conflict, in irritation, in heartbreak, but it shows up so you can integrate it. This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about liberating yourself. Because once you start to see your reactions as reflections, not just injustices, you begin to reclaim power over your inner life. Ask yourself, why does this behavior affect me so deeply? What belief about myself is being triggered? Is this about them, or is it something I've been avoiding within me? Shadow work, as Jung called it, is one of the hardest and most courageous paths. It requires radical honesty. It asks you to stop pointing the finger and start holding the mirror. But the reward, freedom. When you face the parts of yourself you've rejected, no one else can control you with them. You stop being reactive and start being aware. And with awareness comes choice. You can choose boundaries over blame, curiosity over criticism, healing over projection. And here's the beautiful part. The same person who triggered your shadow might also be the one who helps you integrate it. Not through comfort, but through confrontation. Not through harmony, but through disruption. That disruption is sacred, because it's not trying to destroy you, it's trying to wake you up. So the next time someone triggers you, instead of asking, what's wrong with them, try asking, what's this showing me about myself? That question might just be the beginning of the most important love story of all, the one between you and your wholeness. Have you ever met someone who seemed to walk into your life like a storm? Not to comfort, but to shake everything. They didn't just challenge your plans, they disrupted your routine, your beliefs, your very sense of who you thought you were, and for a while, everything felt like it was falling apart. But what if it wasn't falling apart? What if it was breaking open? Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, spoke of a sacred process called individuation. It's the journey of becoming your truest whole self, not the self society trained you to be, not the mask you wear to be accepted, but the soul underneath. And sometimes it takes chaos to begin that journey. When someone disrupts your life, it often feels like they're ruining everything. But in Jungian terms, they're not destroying you, they're dismantling the false self you've outgrown. Think of your ego like a carefully built house. You decorated it with beliefs about who you are, what you deserve, what love should look like. It feels safe, predictable. But over time, it becomes too small for the soul that's growing inside you. Then someone arrives. Maybe they stir intense emotion. Maybe they reveal truths you've been avoiding. Maybe they simply refuse to fit into the story you've written. And suddenly your walls begin to crack. The job doesn't feel right. The relationship doesn't feel aligned. The version of you that used to function starts falling apart. That's not destruction, that's initiation. Because the soul doesn't evolve in comfort. It evolves in fire. These people who interrupt your life are catalysts, spiritual messengers. They didn't come to keep you safe. They came to wake you up. Let me give you an example. You've always been the giver, the fixer, the strong one. Then you meet someone who challenges your boundaries, who forces you to say no, to prioritize yourself for the first time ever. At first, it feels like betrayal, but later, you realize it was rebirth. Or maybe you've lived in control, planned, calculated, always one step ahead. Then someone appears who lives by emotion. They pull you into the mess of feeling. You resist it, you fight it. But somewhere in that chaos, you find a softness you forgot you had. These are not accidents. These are soul arrangements. Jung believed that individuation requires confrontation with the unconscious, and nothing exposes our unconscious patterns faster than relationships that push our limits. So if you're in the middle of that disruption, if someone's presence has flipped your life upside down, pause before labeling it as wrong. Ask instead, what part of me is being awakened? What identity am I being asked to release? What deeper version of myself is trying to emerge? This is not just pain, it's pressure, the kind that transforms coal into diamond. And here's the paradox. The very person who seemed to ruin your life may be the one who helped you reclaim it. They shook your foundation so you'd rebuild on truth, not survival. They broke your heart so you'd open it wider. They disrupted your path so you'd finally choose your own. So no, they didn't come to destroy you. They came to destroy the version of you that was never fully alive to begin with. That's not punishment. That's grace. And on the other side of that disruption, a self you never dared imagine. One that no longer needs validation, control, or perfection, just presence, truth, and wholeness. You're not broken. You're breaking through. Have you ever felt like someone walked into your life and unlocked a part of you that you didn't even know you'd forgotten? Not because they gave you something new, but because they reminded you of something ancient, something already yours. You see, real soul connections don't complete you. They reflect the wholeness that was buried under years of self-doubt, people-pleasing, and silent wounds. Carl Jung once said, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration." And often it takes another person to hold the mirror up to that forgotten self. This is one of the biggest illusions we carry about love, the idea that we're incomplete until we find the one. But you were never missing pieces. You were never half a soul. You were always whole. You just forgot. Life happens. Trauma happens. We get hurt. We adapt. We build masks and habits to survive. And in the process, we disconnect from our own essence, from our own inner voice, from our wildness, from our gentleness, from our sacred truth. Then someone comes along and something stirs. They don't fix you. They don't save you. But suddenly in their presence, you feel more like yourself. Not the version of you that performs, not the one that tries to earn love, but the one that's just there, raw, honest, curious, even messy, but real. You laugh louder, you cry deeper, you remember what it's like to feel, and that right there is the awakening. They aren't your missing piece, they're your reminder. A reminder that you are already enough, that you always were. Think about this. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt like they could see through you, not in a way that exposed your flaws, but in a way that made you feel seen? That kind of connection doesn't create newness. It resurrects your essence. It's not about becoming whole through them. It's about becoming aware of the wholeness that's always been there. Now, this doesn't mean these connections are always peaceful or easy. Sometimes they arrive like a whisper, other times like lightning. But what they awaken in you is never from them, it's from within you. That's the magic, that's the mystery, and that's the invitation. Because after they leave, or even if they stay, what you do with that awakening is yours alone. You can choose to depend on them, hoping they keep you connected to yourself. Or you can take the torch they lit and carry it forward. You can reclaim your voice. You can stand tall in your light. You can stop searching outside for what's always been within. This is where Jung's idea of individuation comes in again, the lifelong process of becoming who you really are. And true love doesn't delay that process. It accelerates it, not by giving you more, but by returning you to you. So the next time someone walks into your life and you feel that familiar pull, that deep recognition that feels more like remembering than discovery, pause. Ask yourself, what part of me are they waking up? What have I been too afraid to see that they now reflect? What if the love I feel isn't coming from them, but being awakened by them? Because here's the truth. You were never waiting to be completed. You were waiting to remember. Have you ever loved someone with every part of your soul and still felt like the universe wouldn't let you stay together? It's one of the most painful paradoxes of the human heart, the kind of love that feels divine, yet somehow remains just out of reach. This isn't ordinary heartbreak. It's not a bad match. It's not about immaturity or timing. It's something deeper, something that stirs not just your heart, but your entire soul. Carl Jung spoke of this tension. He said, the tension between opposites is the source of psychological growth. And sometimes that tension shows up as love. A love so intense it doesn't make sense. So meaningful it defies logic. So spiritually charged it burns not just brightly, but painfully. Have you ever felt that kind of connection, where just being near them made you feel alive and terrified at the same time? Where your soul whispered, "This is home," while your reality screamed, "This can't work. This is the sacred impossible." It's the kind of relationship that doesn't show up to complete your life, but to crack it open, to shake everything you thought you knew, to tear down the version of you that was safe, and rebuild you from the inside out. We're often taught to measure love by its success story, marriage, family, forever. But some of the most transformational love stories never make it to the ending we imagine, because they weren't meant to. Some were meant to ignite you, not hold you. To show you who you could become, not who you should stay with. To create the sacred tension, Jung spoke about the push and pull between surrender and resistance, attachment and individuation, fear and awakening. And here's where it gets even more complex. Just because something is sacred doesn't mean it's sustainable. And that's okay, because the soul doesn't grow through comfort. It grows through challenge, through contrast, through the fire. That impossible love, it's not a mistake, it's an initiation. It's the universe saying, here's the edge of your growth. Will you walk it? It's there to wake up parts of you that would have stayed asleep in any other relationship. Your voice, your longing, your shadow, your truth. It makes you confront everything you've avoided and everything you've buried. And yes, it may leave you aching, but it also leaves you expanded. Sometimes the people who love us most deeply are not the ones who stay, but the ones who shift us. So if you've ever experienced a love like this, a connection that felt fated yet fractured, know this: you're not broken, you're not cursed, you're not unworthy. You were chosen for a specific lesson, a sacred, soul-wrenching, awakening kind of love, the kind that splits you open so you can remember who you really are. So instead of asking, why couldn't it last? Ask yourself, what did it awaken? Because not every sacred bond is meant to be held. Some are meant to free you. Not every love story ends with a ring. Not every chapter closes with happily ever after. But every soul-shifting connection changes you forever. Some people come into our lives like mirrors, like catalysts, like storms. They enter, and whether they stay or leave you, are never quite the same again. And maybe that's the point. Love, especially the kind that shakes you to your core, is not always about building a future with someone else. Sometimes it's about returning to the parts of yourself you abandoned along the way. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the sacred return to the true self, beyond the masks, beyond the roles, beyond the stories you've been told to play. And often it takes a profound relationship to begin that journey. Have you ever noticed how after someone deeply impacts your life, you suddenly start questioning everything? Who am I really? What have I been hiding from? What version of me was I performing for love? That's the power of love that awakens, not comforts. You see, real transformation doesn't come from safety. It comes from friction, from contrast, from love that refuses to let you stay asleep. Maybe that person didn't stay. Maybe the relationship ended in silence. Maybe they loved you wildly and then walked away. But here's the truth: they played their part. They cracked something open inside you. They reminded you of what you've forgotten. They became the turning point in your story, not because they completed you, but because they reintroduced you to you. And that's the beauty of soul-shaking love. It doesn't just give you memories, it gives you mirror moments. Moments where you stop chasing approval and start chasing authenticity. Moments where you drop the masks and finally see your own face again. Moments where you stop trying to be chosen and start choosing yourself. And yes, it may be painful. Yes, it may feel unfair. But beneath the heartbreak is something sacred, a homecoming. Because no matter how they entered or exited your life, the journey wasn't really about them. It was about you, your healing, your wholeness, your truth. So if you're still grieving the ending, pause. Look at who you've become because of that love. You're deeper, wiser, more awake, and maybe that was the real purpose all along. Because the greatest loves don't just hold your hand, they hand you back yourself. Maybe you thought this was just a love story. Maybe you believed it was about them, the connection, the spark, the heartbreak. But what if I told you it was never about them? You see, you didn't just fall in love with another person. You collided with your own soul. They were the mirror, the sacred one, the one who didn't just reflect who you are today, but who you used to be and who you're capable of becoming. It's easy to call it heartbreak, to label the ending as failure, but Carl Jung would tell you otherwise. In his words, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And sometimes it takes losing someone else to find your way back to yourself. This connection, no matter how brief, chaotic, or painful, was never random. It was divinely disruptive. It broke the old so that the new could awaken. And now, you are no longer who you were before it began. You've touched parts of yourself you didn't know existed. You've seen your shadows. You've tasted your light. That's not just love. That's initiation. So don't call it failure. Don't call it loss. Call it what it truly was, a return to your center. Because if you're here right now, feeling every word, nodding with tears in your eyes, this video wasn't just content. It was a soul call, a gentle whisper pulling you back home, to a place within you that you may have forgotten, but never truly lost. And that home, it's not in them, it's in you. So breathe, close your eyes, and welcome yourself back. You're not broken, you're becoming.